Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show.
This may not be the way that Lin-Manuel Miranda wanted Hamilton to be seen, but streaming or not, Hamilton is the film we need right now. This boisterous, groundbreaking, visionary view of American history. And there he is in ponytail and goatee, Lin-Manuel Miranda as Alexander Hamilton, this orphan immigrant head bursting with ideas for that American project, reframing our idea and reminding us who he was.
Two Virginians and an immigrant walk into a room.
And right next to him, there he is, Leslie Odom Jr. as Aaron Burr, the frenemy. A critic put it that way. I can't take credit.
The immigrant emerges with unprecedented.
Burr was the competitor, the colleague. He was at his side. He was aiding and abetting. And so watching those two, and as Hamilton begins, of course, you're struck by the multiracial casting, by, the fact that this piece of American history looks more like a barrio in New York City or a block in Brooklyn, this wonderful mixture of black and white and Latino faces. And what it does, it's more than just, changing the way we see it. Like, gone are the musty old men in the powdered wigs, those old profiles you might know from the paper money. It imbues the story with a vigor, with a vibrancy. You see the energy and ambition of these young men who were writing the rules of this new nation.
Don't forget from whence you came, and the world's gonna know.
Of Hamilton, who would let nothing stand in his way, and that would affect him. Of Burr, who could barely contain his envy. Of Daveed Diggs, who plays two roles. Of Lafayette, the French military officer who helped the Americans, but the way Diggs plays him, there's this playfulness. He's almost like the court jester. And then he segues into his second role of Thomas Jefferson, someone who could hold his own in terms of swagger and smarts against Alexander Hamilton.
No one else was in the room where it happened, the room where it happened, the room where it happened.
Just as Hamilton remixes our idea of American history, the music itself is R&B and hip-hop and jazz. And what makes that hip-hop flavor, what makes putting backroom politics to a hip-hop beat so appropriate, is that with hip-hop there is this sense of irreverence. There's this idea of you sample and you remix, you take the old sources and you change the context and you create new meaning. And that's exactly what these men were doing. That's what makes it so fitting as they tell the story of the American project. Now, the challenge is that this was a musical. This was a play in the Richard Rodgers Theater. And how do you do justice to that? How do you capture that what must have been electricity in the air to watch this cast do their thing? Well, what you do is you use a lot of cameras. They spared no expense, and they used 9 stationary cameras hidden throughout the theater. They filmed 2 productions with the audience there in the seats. So you feel that energy, you hear that response.
That's what I'm talking about! Now everyone, give it up!
You hear the roar when Miranda strides onto the stage, but then more than that, there's also other cameras that were used where they cleared out the audience, and they used dollies, and they used cranes, and they used close-ups, so you get all the various angles of those numbers. Now, I will admit, at first watching Hamilton, the film of the play, I struggled. I mean, this is such a rich play, and there's so much depth to what's happening on stage. At times, you almost don't know where to look because there is so much action, and the screen is so flat. And so you need someone to kind of direct your gaze, but somewhere around the point where Miranda started singing Rise Up and George Washington comes onto the scene, that's where I really found myself kind of in the pocket and kind of getting, okay, I see it. I get why this was so special. And in a way, this film version of the musical is the best of both worlds. You're going to see things that you'd never see even with those $800 seats. But I think part of what makes this format so appropriate, makes it fit, is that Hamilton was cinematic in a way for a Broadway production even before cameras entered the equation. Take a look at this number, Satisfied, with Angelica singing to the bride and groom.
To your union, to the revolution, and the hope that you provide.
This is part of the Schuyler Sisters. There's so much subtext built into this one song, and you can see how at a certain moment they freeze time. The players start to move back and forth. They're almost playing with editing effects on the stage itself. And time is very much part of what makes this recording of Hamilton special. Not just that it's BP before the pandemic, and so it was captured in 2016 under the presidency of Obama, but also that this was one of the last times this particular cast, the original cast, would perform together. And you know, I was watching this and I was looking at Lin-Manuel Miranda, looking at how he was, you know, vibrating at times, his voice quavering, so much emotion coming to the surface for him and the entire cast. I'm thinking, do they always do that? Are they always that good? Could they channel that night after night? And I think part of it is that this is a time capsule. This is a recording of one of those few final performances for that group of actors. It was special. And you can feel that even in the recording. And you know, speaking of time, there's a moment near the end of Hamilton where he speaks about his legacy. And he says, and I want to quote here, "America, you great unfinished symphony you sent for me." Something sent this idea, this bold reimagining of America's story to Lin-Manuel Miranda. And if ever there was a time for those songs to be sung, it's now. It is quite the experience. It's long but rewarding. I was affected by this. By the end, I felt like I was holding back tears, and I don't get overcome very easily. So I hope you enjoy. I certainly did.